So here is another question that I have. We know traditionally the djembe is associated with rituals and have a little bit of influence in spiritual ceremonies among the Malinka people. But with where djembe is at the moment, Emmanuel mentioned earlier that djembe is like the feast of West African drumming, and it's quite popular that we have white people playing this instrument. Do we still consider it as a ritual instrument or a social instrument, or do we say it plays both ways? Let's hear your thought.
Thank you, Kosi. Well, the world is becoming a global village. I must say that I see the world like in the next 20 years. Let me even give it 20 years. In the next 10, 20 years, it will be very difficult to be able to, how will I say, to be able to say that this thing is sacred, secret, you cannot take it out there, people should not know about it. I think the world is going past that, not because we will not celebrate people's culture, people's tradition, will not give it that respect. But I feel that the world is fast evolving, and we really need to also embrace that so that other people can come to appreciate our culture and our tradition. And then I'll give an example, though it might not make sense a bit. An example is one day I stumbled on a writing on somebody making a comment on one of these digital platforms, and it says that it's very rare in the world that you will not see a Nigerian. Okay, like it's very rare in the world to not see a Nigerian Bhutanese, a Nigerian Nepalese, a Nigerian. You understand what I'm saying? That
Mm.
Nigerians marry across the world, as in it's almost impossible. That somebody even mentioned that he has an extended family that is married to a Mongolian. As in, when I was reading that comment, I was like, wow, this is very interesting. And these are mono, how will I put them? They are cultures that they are very protective. Even in Japan, you see Nigerians marrying Japanese. So I feel that the world is changing. I think the world is moving fast from saying that, oh, this thing is our thing, we don't want anybody to share it with us. I think the world is going to a place that people can come, learn about other people's tradition, not to trample on it, but to appreciate it for what it is and be able to be part of it also. I feel that that's where the world is going. So I don't feel that the gender has been abused or the sacredness is being trampled on. I feel that the world is coming to appreciate the beauty of the face of African drum, which is the djembe, as Emmanuel called it. And it's something that we also need to throw our doors open to and let the world learn about it and enjoy it more. Not because we don't value what we have, but I think when you share something, it gives you more value than when you keep it. As they used to say, it's more blessed to give than to keep. Let me put it like that, not to receive. But so that's my position on that. Thank you.
Yeah, very, very interesting thought, Anu. I think this, what you just said, kind of brings me to my next question. This idea of, let's give people a chance to come and appreciate our culture. Yeah, I totally agree with that. But do you think, the influence of Djembe, now that we've allowed people to come and experience, some of this, our cultures, and it's being transported to different corners of the world, Europe, America. We have, I just came across a page on Facebook that is called Djembe Orchestra in Colorado, and it's full of white men and women. So, do you think this, overall, the global journey of this instrument is a sign of cultural diffusion, or cultural appropriation, or do you think it's, a little bit of both? What do you think, Emmanuel?
Thank you for Kosi. Yeah, it's there's a thin line between all that. and one of the reasons it could easily become a cultural appropriation is uh, when Africans are quiet about their ownership of these instruments. And then people, before you know, stories are told, and Africa is the origins, like we tell here, is excluded from those stories. A lot of the things that we've shared here today are not popular knowledge about the djembe. Most of what we know about the djembe is that it comes from West Africa. West Africa is a very large place. Where in West Africa, how exactly did the djembe come about? Most people do not know, and so the risk of it becoming very culturally misappropriated is high because Africans are not. We know djembe belongs to us. We know djembe came from us. But I do the rest of the world know? A few people could know and make a killing out of it, from make names out of it, and before you know, djembe becomes associated with those names rather than their true origin. There is a lot about djembe that leads back to Guinea Conakry and Burkina Faso. But my first exposure to djembe was through Mbalax, which is from Senegal. I mean, even though they are all the same people, it still doesn't give an accurate framing of of this instrument. So I think I agree with Anu that yeah, there is no need to culture guard these kind of things. But what we need to do is also tell the accurate stories of behind these things so that generations from now would know how we got here, how Djembe is going to transition because everybody in the world, you know, Djembe is now known for its healing capabilities. I've seen people use djembe as that in drumming circles for healing. I was looking at this TEDx talk by some guy. He's originally from Ghana. He does stuff around the healing properties of music, and one of the key instruments he uses is djembe. But he's from Ghana. There is the Monet lady, Monet Marino, who's in California, also does djembe classes. She said she spent 20 years learning djembe from a djembe fola in either Burkina Faso or Senegal. But over years, these stories can be lost if our voices are not represented on these stages. If there is no living djembe page on African Music Library, for instance, detailing these core facts about djembe, other people will tell our stories and it could be lost and the culture will be misappropriated. And before you know, we could start saying djembe is a Chinese instrument or because it's made in China, or it's an American instrument because an American is promoting it and all that. So that's something to bear in mind.
Very interesting thoughts, Emmanuel. I think a typical example of this misappropriation or cultural appropriation is the conga drum. Me for one, I don't know if conga has any spiritual associations. I just have an idea that conga is a Latin instrument, but a lot of people don't know that conga is a Latin instrument. I might even be wrong saying that it's Latin, right? Because the information about this instrument has been lost for years, and that's one of the fears I have for djembe. Yeah, we're happy. There is a lot of cultural diffusion around the djembe instrument. It has traveled and inspired fusions and variety of collaborations. But on the other hand, it kind of gets to a point when you know when you start saying it's being appropriated is when people playing this instrument doesn't really acknowledge that West African roots that it has. A typical example of how you can acknowledge this if you are a non-West African player is learning from proper West African communities, or learning from like the woman Emmanuel mentioned that learned that spends quite some time learning this instrument from a Djembe folklore. So you see, when you're trying to play this instrument, give a little insight about, this fact. This is going to make your audience kind of perceive this instrument differently. But when all these things are not done, it starts being treated like, just another drum from, Africa. Just like we treat conga now. Conga is just like another instrument. They don't necessarily even point it towards the Latin people. They just, mention it is just conga. So that's particularly one of my fears for the djembe instrument. Let's hear what Anu has to say about this.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kosi and Emmanuel. So, Emmanuel, you actually made me laugh when you said that. People now say that Djembe is from China. That was a very funny one. Okay. So, I'll just align with Emmanuel that Africans need to tell their story and also document their story. We cannot overemphasize that. Africa needs to tell their story and document their story. Not only tell, but also document. And after documenting, keep those documents, protect them. Let not someone rewrite your story for us. That's very important. And that's also what we have with the Kalimba and the Mbira now. As in, I was doing a research about the Mbira last week, and it was like, okay, so the Imbira is almost so quiet that I could barely get pictures for Imbira, but I was seeing the westernized version of the Imbira, which is the Kalimba. And it's so different. It's different in terms of the pentatonic scale and all that. It's different. One is aligned to the Western pentatonic scale, and the Imbira has its own local tradition keys that comes with it. And that's what has happened, whether we like it or not. So if they want to tell the story now, we tell the Imbira is from Shonan people in Zimbabwe. But Kalimba, though you trace it, that actually did the westernization, you can't really say that it's for the Shona people. If you check online now, they tell you it's the westernized version of the Imbira. And what happens in a decade or 20 or 2 decades down the line? And then we don't have a story about the Imbira again. So the Kalimba now becomes the instrument that nobody's talking about. Another example, if you want to look at it also, is the balafon and the xylophone. As in, you can see now, you go online, you rarely see the balafon pictures, images. When I was working on one of these photo editing, but I was seeing the westernized version was the of the xylophone. It was what I was saying. The glockenspiel and the other types were what I was saying. I really seeing the pictures of the balafon. So you can see that gradually instrument would evolve and evolve into a new identity and take on a new history. So Africans need to tell their story. And thanks to the African Music Library for championing that. And I know that some other organizations also doing that. Africans need to tell their story. They need to document their story, and they need to preserve the story for the future generation. And then we will be able to stand in the face of any fear or anybody telling a contrary story to say, no, this is the true story. And then we can be able to own our tradition as much as we love to share it with the world. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Anu. I don't, yes, this cannot be overemphasized. If you look at the Wikipedia entry for female djembe followers, and djembe followers are those who play djembe, the only represented female djembe follower here is the Salimata Diabate, who's from Burkina Faso. The other female djembe follower is Monette Marino from California, who even won an award for for yeah, for a competition in over playing djembe, the hand drum of
Imagine.
competition in 2001. And there's also a lady from France, I think, who was also documented as a female djembe. She's from France. So if we don't tell our stories, after multiple iterations of this, in fact, the female players from Burkina Faso will be dropped from this story
Yeah.
because first they've not got any awards, they've not even got any international recognition. They probably don't even have a voice or a website of their own to document their journey and their stories. So in 20 years from now, it someone can easily drop them from this history, and that's how you change the narrative. So it's very important that we keep documenting and preserving these documents, archiving them, and making them available to the future generation.
Yeah, very interesting thoughts and conversations with you, Emmanuel and Anu, and also shout out to the African Music Library for documenting the stories, of our genres, of our instruments, preserving it for the next generation of Africans that are coming up, so that we don't lose these stories in time. It's been an interesting conversation with you two, and like I said, we appreciate you making out time to come and talk to us about this instrument. I don't know if there are any final thoughts from anyone. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in to another episode of the African Music Library Instrument Discussion. Please do not forget that this episode was brought to you by the African Music Library. Subscribe to our podcast on Just Play Music and follow us on our social media at AML by Just Play. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.